Verse 19, chapter 3, verse 19, is one of the most famous verses, not just in King Benjamin's speech, but in the entire Book of Mormon, where he speaks of the natural man being an enemy to God, and has been from the fall of Adam, and will be forever unless he yields to the enticings of the Holy Spirit, and putteth off the natural man, and becometh a saint through the atonement of Christ the Lord. Now you'll notice how he follows this up, and also becometh as a child. And then he lists a whole series of attributes of children. Submissive, meek, humble, patient, full of love, willing to submit to all things that the Lord seeth fit to inflict upon him, even as a child doth submit to his father. The fascinating thing for me is to notice that every list of good attributes in the Scriptures, regardless of who it's describing in the immediate audience or in the immediate storyline, every good list is simply a description of Jesus Christ. You want to become a true Christian. You want to be more like Christ. Every time you come to these lists, it would be worth your time to mark each element in whatever way works for you and contemplate, perhaps begin with times in Jesus' life where he demonstrated those different attributes, those characteristics, those perfections, so that you can come to understand the character of Christ, his being, so that he becomes more than just a painting on a wall or a statue on your shelf or a name on a page, but he becomes more real to you. He becomes more relatable, more understandable. So for instance, becometh as, we could replace the word child there with becometh as Christ. Nobody was more submissive than Christ. His whole life was submitting his will to the Father. Meek, humble, patient. You could think of examples and stories throughout his life and in the Scriptures where he modeled those attributes and those perfections. And then don't stop there, because it's not enough for us to just stop at the glorifying Christ realm, but to say, I want to emulate him. That's what the covenant path is all about. It's a path, a way to become like him. Not just to return to the presence of our heavenly parents, to become more like them. And so we could think of times, and unfortunately, every one of us is going to be able to think of the negative times where we weren't submissive, where we weren't meek, where we weren't humble, we weren't patient. But hopefully, we can become more intentional, more purposeful in our prayers, going to God saying specifically, I need help. I want to be more like Jesus. It begins with this desire in our hearts, and we plead with God to help us be more of these attributes, and then be patient with ourselves. Be humble with ourselves in the process of stumbling along this covenant path, which some of us more than others spend more time on the ground trying to figure out how we fell yet again. But gratefully that rod of iron is there at all times to help us get back up and keep moving forward. And for some of us, this last line is really important. Being willing to submit to all things which the Lord seeth fit to inflict upon him, even as a child doth submit to his father. Brothers and sisters, some of the greatest tests of your discipleship, some of the greatest tests of your character are going to be what you do with things that God has given you that aren't pleasant. It could be health concerns, it could be family struggles, relational issues, it could be emotional, mental, financial, spiritual struggles and wrestles that are given to you by God. And instead of shaking our fist at heaven and cursing the heavens for why is my life so hard? Why do I have to deal with this when they don't? Instead of that, to follow Christ's example, which is perfectly laid out for us in his phrase when he goes into Gethsemane and falls to the ground. His prayer is, Abba, Father, all things are possible unto thee. Remove this cup from me. But then he follows it up with, nevertheless, not as I will, but as thou wilt. Not my will, but thine be done. You do whatever you need to do, and I will be submissive. I will be meek, and I will do it. And quite frankly, that is a blueprint for all of us as we go through life, that God gives us things that are really hard. And just like He didn't take the suffering away from Jesus in Gethsemane and during the trials and on the cross, often He doesn't take them away from us immediately in this life as well, because that's where we learn the most about God and about ourselves in the process.